Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, voters elect a new leader of Chicago. We hear some of Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson's victory speech and his hopes for the city. Critics call a foul on the double standards following the women's college basketball championship game. Dramatic findings on police traffic stops in Chicago and the racial inequities that persist. A local activist promotes a new club in Pilsen, but it might not be what you're thinking.
You may not have experienced what you're seeing on this stage, but it actually did happen.
And a murder mystery takes the main stage at CIBC Theater. All that coming up. But our first story tonight, the second black man ever to be elected Chicago mayor, right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Brandon Johnson is preparing to take over the helm as mayor of Chicago after his election night win over Paul Vallis this week. In his victory speech, Johnson reflected on the progressive movement that mobilized his campaign. He also referenced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., remembering King's assassination 55 years ago on that very day. Here's some of Johnson's speech, which echoed Dr. King's dream.
Today, we did not just commemorate the life and the legacy of one of the greatest humanitarians who ever walked the planet Earth. Today, we did not just acknowledge the assassination of a dreamer. Today, the dream is alive. And so today, we celebrate the revival and the resurrection of the city of Chicago. It is time for Chicago to come alive. Come alive, Chicago. My name is Brandon Johnson, and I can't wait to be sworn in as the next mayor of the greatest city in the world.
Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson giving his victory speech earlier this week. It was the most watched NCAA women's basketball final in television history. Louisiana State University beating the University of Iowa in the women's college basketball championship. But what got all the attention was what happened in the last few seconds of the game. LSU star Angel Reese made a few taunting gestures at Hawkeyes star player Caitlin Clark. Reese was met with backlash online for making that "you can't see me" gesture, despite Clark, who's white, also having done the same move in a previous game. The incident is sparking discussion about double standards black women face in sports. Joining us now are Sabria Whitaker, a sports consultant and founder of the nonprofit Grow the Game. It aims to increase engagement and involvement in women's sports. Andrea Williams, head coach of the women's basketball team at Chicago State University. And Brandon Pope, anchor and reporter at CW26 Chicago, podcast host at WBEZ, and president of the National Association of Black Journalists Chicago Chapter. Welcome, all of you. Welcome back, Brandon. Thanks for joining us. Sabria Whitaker, let's start with you, please. Some of that backlash against Angel Reese, it involved some fairly ugly name calling. She's a college sophomore at LSU. What was your reaction to some of that?
I was upset. I wasn't shocked, wasn't surprised, but I mean, I still can't wrap my mind around how so many adults, grown adults, could just take their anger out on someone so young about something so unimportant, really, in the theme of in the scheme of things in basketball, and such a great game, and that's what they chose to focus on.
Coach, same question to you.
Again, it's just disappointing in some of the leaders in the sports industry, male and female, and again, making about something different than it was. It was two competitors competing. That final game you want to win, go out on a win. They both had great runs. And again, both have done the gesture, but you're seeing the backlash from one side usually. But again, you also were able to see how they grew from it and their great responses to the adults making some different reactions, especially on Twitter.
I don't play much sports, but I get the impression that kind of, taunting a little bit, it's part of the game. Does it happen?
I would say yes, and it's a little bit more of this generation. You know, John Cena came with the first one, you know, so we're going to emulate something that's cool. And again, both players can back it up. It was great to see for our game. Our game is growing, the athleticism and what they bring to the table. So it's disappointing that people want to chime in at the last second when you have over the 9 million viewers that were already watching and already know about our sport. So that's the disappointing part.
Brandon Pope, same question to you. What was your reaction to that?
Not surprised, but disappointed for sure. It's just bonkers. I'm a big sports guy. I've been covering sports for a while. This is what people do. This is what makes sports great. The intensity, the emotion, the great characters and players. And people just acted like they had never seen a sporting event in their life. And it was back to the same old tropes we've been fighting for years and decades and decades. And so we got to do better, not just for women's basketball, but just for society, because it's just not right the way this dialogue has gone.
Sabria, how do you think black women are treated differently in sports?
I mean, I don't even think we have a long enough segment for that. But, I mean, well, first I just want to say that already women are treated differently. So we would not be having this conversation if this happened in the men's championship game at all. It happens all the time. We don't hear about it. But, I mean, black women are not given the same freedom of expression. They can't do the same moves. They are allowed more contact where non-black players probably would have gotten a whistle. They must be more feminine. They can't be too masculine. I mean, the list goes on. I don't know what they are allowed to do other than just play the game, and even then they're held to such a higher standard.
Coach, you know, as we discussed, this game was the most watched NCAA women's basketball final in TV history. That was before this incident happened, right? Because this was at the end of the game. What's changed that got so many people to tune in to this women's basketball game?
Part of it is the first time since 1985, if I have my facts right, that UConn, Tennessee, or Stanford was not in the Final Four. You had new competitors, great programs, great coaches bringing their teams to it. A lot more women and girls are watching and emulating. You have people growing up. Angel Reese loved Simone Augustus. That was her role model. She got to see her during the Final Four when she was little. So you see those pictures and that legacy. You have Caitlin Clark, who looked up to Lindsay Whalen. So you have role models that they've seen. So I think it was just that whole generation of coming together and being able to watch the excitement. We're going to have a new crown champion, and we're going to see some athleticism. You wanted to see Caitlin Clark just shoot and come off a screen, reverse the screen, refuse it, and then shoot. You want to see Angel Reese get to the rim and do what she does well. So they provided that great entertainment, what we were anticipating, and what we can carry forward. So the stars, they shone out, as you would say.
Sabria, in an interview, Caitlin Clark later on came out saying that she didn't think that Angel Reese should be criticized. Should that even matter?
No, it shouldn't. And I mean, just some context for that. I understand that she was given that opportunity and asked that question when she was supposed to be receiving her award. So I know that there's been a lot of backlash to that happening. So I do want to just go ahead and acknowledge that. But to ask her that question, especially when you know it's not an opportunity for Angel Reese to come and speak as well, to me, it just validated the need for white validation. Because if we all said that it was fine, if Angel said it was fine, that should have been enough. I don't think we needed to go ahead and ask Caitlin Clark to end the conversation.
Brandon, as you said, you cover sports a lot. Let's talk about the White House for a little bit, right? We earlier this week we heard the First Lady Jill Biden suggest that maybe both teams should join her at the White House because it was an historic game. What's been some of the reaction to that, though? That idea?
Oh, the reaction's been polarizing. I mean, Angel Reese right away saying, well, that ain't happening. And then you have a wave of social media users also saying this makes no sense. Why? Because if Iowa would have won the championship, do we think that Jill Biden would be inviting LSU to come to the White House? No, not at all. Now, it may have been seen as an overall good gesture from Jill Biden just to support women's basketball overall, but in the end, winners are winners. The winners go to the White House, and LSU won the championship. When Caitlin Clark wins a championship, she can go there. And so I think it just speaks to a wider way in which women's basketball is covered and viewed in media that's got to change. We prop up one player or one team, as if only one can shine, when in reality, when you look at the NFL, the NBA, it's a league of stars and multiple teams, and we understand that when those teams succeed, we give them those opportunities, like going to the White House. There's no participation trophies, and so the same should apply in women's basketball. And so, of course, the backlash was swift, as it should have been.
Coach, how do you discuss something like this with your players? What do you tell them?
Again, they're excited to watch the game. I think we're still dealing with all the polarization from COVID, from the shutdown, just dividing the nation a little bit from George Floyd, which totally understand. And it's all going to trickle into everybody comes together for sports, and then you want to watch sports. So it was turned into kind of a black-white issue, or this team and that team, two different styles. It's just going to bring a lot more people who aren't invested to the game. They're going to have their say on Twitter, the little Twitter lawyers, and that's the main thing we're talking about. So we just discuss openly, our team, what we do well, certain teams, what they do well. And I think it's more the celebration. We're going from that aspect, not to tear anybody down. Because the funny thing is now, Angel Reese is now the Bayou Barbie. You've had 3 other people want to get the Bayou Barbie on Twitter, and coaches and players, and then, kind of emulate what she's doing. So these kids are taking advantage of the NIL. It does need to be talked about, and we do need to be celebrated, and we need to be held to both accountable for our actions, black and white. They both were doing it's good for the game, and I think we need to continue, as the young kids are showing, growing in that direction, and some of the older ones maybe back off.
Sabrina, we've got about 20 seconds left. What more needs to be done to support women's sports?
If you don't have anything to add to it, then don't say anything at all. If you do have something to add, then start with what you can do. You don't have to meet what anyone else is doing. You don't have to start a Grow the Game nonprofit organization. Just show up, support, bring a friend, and say nice things or nothing at all.
If you can't say anything nice, come sit by me. I'm kidding.
Exactly.
I see Brandon at home nodding his head. We are out of time. Thanks, team Sabrina Whitaker, Coach Andrea Williams, and Brandon Pope. Thanks, everybody. Up next, Phil Ponce and the disproportionate impact of traffic stops in Chicago in a conversation recorded earlier.
The Chicago mayoral election has put a spotlight on public safety and police-community relations. A new report on traffic stops offers fresh insights into policing in Chicago and some inequities that may persist. Among the findings, the average black driver is 6 times more likely to be stopped here than the average white driver. Joining us now with more are Lauren Jones. She's staff attorney at Business and Professional People for the Public Interest, or BPI, and she's a member of the Free to Move Coalition. And Jose Manuel Almanza Jr., he's director of advocacy and movement building at Equiticity and coordinator for the Free to Move Coalition. That coalition works to create a more racially equitable traffic safety system in the city. By the way, we also invited the Chicago Police Department, which declined, but they did send a statement, which we will get to later. And let me, first of all, thank you for being here. Lauren Jones, what are the main takeaways from this study?
Well, thank you for having us. The main things that we took away from this study, first of all, is that the Chicago Police Department has been making an alarming number of traffic stops in the past couple of years. So for instance, in 2015, they made about 86,000 stops, and by 2019, that number was at 600,000. And while it's dropped a little bit since the COVID-19 pandemic started, it's back on the rise again in 2021 with around 370,000 stops.
Jose Almanza, why do you think the increase is happening?
Yeah, the increase is happening because the police department has shifted strategies. So before 2015, as you see in the spike, they were doing stop and frisk. So they were stopping and frisking people walking on the street, people just out being pedestrians. And then after the consent decree that the Supreme Court found that stop and frisk was unconstitutional, they had to shift strategies. So now they shifted to stopping vehicles. After that.
And Lauren Jones, aside from the spikes in the number of stops that you've discovered in the study, what else does the study tell you about racial inequities?
Yeah, so we worked with the University of Chicago Data Science Institute to take a really, really close look at the inequities that we are seeing across Chicago. And one was mentioned that black drivers are more likely to be stopped, 6 times more likely to be stopped than white drivers. Latino drivers are more likely to twice as likely to be stopped than white drivers, but we also see geographic disparities. So 20% of traffic stops happen in just 2 police districts, the 7th and the 11th, which are on the west and the south sides of Chicago, the Garfield Park area and the Inglewood area, which only contain 5% of the city's population and are majority black. And we see in white neighborhoods that black and Latin drivers are more likely to be stopped as well in over 73% of police districts.
And Jose, you personally have had experiences along those lines. What have your experiences been? What's happened?
Yeah, I mean, I've been getting pulled over by police throughout my life as a teenager, getting my license through my early 20s. And I figured once I get older, these type of situations will stop. But they haven't. I've been pulled over just a few times in this year so far, and each time, I get a physiological response to it. I get nervous, I get sweaty, my heart starts racing, I start stuttering, and then I ask myself, am I looking suspicious? And this is conversations that I hear from folks all over the west side and south side of Chicago of people having similar reactions.
And Lauren Jones, have you been stopped as well?
I have been stopped. I was stopped a couple months ago just leaving my job, and that stop really echoed some of the data that we see. I was pulled over and asked a question about where I was going, and then she told me that I had an expired registration tag, which is a huge part of the kinds of stops that we're seeing.
Did you?
And then I did, but it had just expired, and so I got that fixed. But I wasn't cited, which also is mirrored in the data. Less than 5% of stops result in any kind of citation.
What do you say to people who might be watching this segment and say, okay, my registration tag is expired, it's clear from the license plate, officer pulls me over, they give me a citation, they don't, no harm, no foul. And if people just go along with what the police are saying, then the incident goes away in a sense.
I think Jose's example really paints a picture of how these stops affect people differently. That physiological response and the fear that you get, as well as just wanting to get from point A to point B without real interference in your life, is really a bigger impact on Black and Latina communities. And we're seeing that these impacts don't. The impacts from stops include things like arrest and citation that are disproportionately harming Black and Latina people.
Well, as I mentioned, we did receive a statement from the Chicago Police Department, and here's what they said. They said, in part, officers only conduct traffic stops when they have probable cause or reasonable articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed, is being committed, or is about to be committed. These stops are not conducted based on race. Additionally, as part of our ongoing reform and consent decree compliance efforts, CPD mandates implicit bias training for all Chicago police officers. Jose, your reaction to that statement?
That doesn't add up to my personal experience and also the experience of many community members that I've spoken to. Oftentimes it seems that police are fishing for something. Well, we get pulled over for a broken taillight, for example, or having an unlit license plate. And then they're asking for if we have a gun. They're asking who else is in the car. They're asking for names. They're asking for other things that have nothing to do with the taillight broken or with the other, with the unlit license plate.
And Lauren, your reaction to that statement?
Yeah, I'll definitely piggyback off of what Jose said. They suggest that they're making these stops because they have some sort of suspicion that criminal activity is happening. But the stops that we looked at for this report are based entirely on the stops that they're making because they saw a traffic violation and then decided to continue to investigate for signs of criminal activity where there are very, very rarely any signs. And this needle in a haystack approach is leading to immense harm in communities around Chicago.
Jose, as you know, in the current mayoral race, there has been a lot of attention put on the relationship between law enforcement and people in the community. How does this study sort of inform some of the things that maybe should be on the table?
Yeah, I think our leaders need to be looking at what the data is saying. They need to really listen to what community members are saying and really use this to inform policy. Because oftentimes community members are left out. If community members were brought to the table in addressing CPD policy from the beginning, we wouldn't be here right now. So.
Lauren Jones, Jose Almanza, thank you both for being here. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you so much.
Back with more Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, right after this.
A murder mystery is taking center stage at the CIBC Theater in a Broadway production based on a film from the 80s. Arts correspondent Angel Ito marches us over to Norm Lewis and his rendition of A Soldier's Play.
All you men out of In 1984, a depiction of a black soldier's experience during World War II hit the big screen in A Soldier's Story.
Right in the lobby of the Officers Club.
The story follows Captain Richard Davenport, a black officer sent to investigate the murder of the troop's master sergeant.
Like it or not, Captain, I am all you've got.
That story has since been adapted into a Broadway production titled A Soldier's Play. It stars Norm Lewis, who plays Captain Davenport.
My first understanding of A Soldier's Play was the movie A Soldier's Story, and that was back in the mid-'80s. And Denzel Washington, and David Allen Greer, and the great Howard Rollins. I heard it got critical acclaim, and then finally it made it to Broadway, like in 2020. But after all these years, even winning a Pulitzer Prize, it took that long for that to happen.
How far do you think you could get? Even if you succeed, these locals aren't going to charge a white man in this parish.
There's a murder right at the beginning, and then I'm there to investigate that. So it's that element, but then it's also shrouded in racism. It's also shrouded in self-hatred, brotherhood, elements of these men who want to fight for their country, to be respected once they come back because they think that will help their cause. And we know that that's not true. The entire show is through my eyes. But then I'm interviewing people to find out who did this, this murder, and they're telling their story.
When asked how veterans who cannot relate to the experience of serving while black would respond to the play, Lewis recalled his time working on a Spike Lee joint, Da 5 Bloods, and its depiction of serving in Vietnam while black.
And what I found out was that was the first war that there was not a separate army, not a black and a white army. It was all mixed together.
My mama told me that money is the root of all evil.
What role do you see art playing in bridging the gap amongst audiences that will come to see this production?
It's art that really guides us and reaches to the heart and soul. And if they can see something being depicted on that stage, and hopefully if we bring the real element and the authenticity of it, hopefully their hearts and minds will change, or at least be inspired.
For Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Angel Ito.
And you can see A Soldier's Play now through April 16th at the CIBC Theater. Since February 8th, Inglewood activist Alita Clark has been spending her nights at the East Pilsen club she promotes called Club 51. The club has caught the attention of celebrities and people across the country, but it might not be the kind of club you're thinking of. Club 51 is under a Pilsen viaduct, and Alita Clark is sleeping there every night in solidarity with the people who live there, people she collectively calls the Friends. Clark says she'll keep sleeping there until she raises enough money to open a shelter. Here, she gives the last word on what she says being a friend truly means.
The Friends live out here. They are people who are put on this poster board for being the lowest of the low because they have untreated mental illness, they suffer from addictions, and because they don't have jobs, so people look at them like they ain't nothing. I've been out here sleeping in solidarity with the Friends, trying to raise money for my shelter. My goal is $1 million. So far, I've been able to raise $140,000. I've had 2 citywide sleepouts where I've encouraged other people to come out and sleep in solidarity with me just to show the Friends like they're not alone. So that's why I don't call them homeless. When I'm out here, I want them to know that they are loved and they're respected, and everybody that comes out here and works through me gonna do the exact same thing that I do and gonna treat them with the same agape love that I treat them with, or they're not gonna be around me. Find something in yourself that you don't like and tell me how it would feel if they called you fat or ugly instead of by your name. When you come out here and say, I'm feeding the homeless people, you reminding them that they don't got shit. Instead of just saying, hey, what's your name? Oh, what's up, Mr. Mark? You hungry? Cool, I got some food. You want some of this? You giving them their integrity back. Dropping off a half-eaten plate is not helping them. How would you feel if somebody did that to you? I move with love and respect and power. I know everybody can't be out here and make the sacrifices that I'm willing to make, but you can share, you can post, you can donate, you can pull up to serve. The Friends are regular people. The Friends are your aunts, your uncles, your mother, your fathers, your brothers. They're you. They just don't have as much support as you have. So instead of judging them, why not just help them? Just support me. Help me get the word out here. When I'm out here, I'm gangbanging. And I'm not talking about hurting nobody. I'm talking about loving people. It's always a gang of us. We always banging loud music. So when I'm out here, this is what I call gangbanging. This gangster shit. Did you hear that, WTTW?
Yeah, we hear you. Though Clark has been working to support the Friends for years, this particular effort began when Clark used donations to book a month-long reservation for the Friends at a West Loop hotel, but learned the hotel had canceled their reservations upon the group's arrival. Since then, she's also hosted 2 sleepouts for people to join her and the Friends under the viaduct to raise funds and awareness. You'll find more on that on our website. That is our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out WTTW.com/news for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know you can also catch Black Voices and Latino Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And join me and Paris Schutz next week at 10 on Chicago Tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.